그런 분노, 싸움의 의지, 어떤 어려움 만나도 계속 싸우겠다는 그런 매차원 의지가 저한테는 아주 좋았고, 간결하고 쉽고 서정적이고 그리고 동양적인 시도 아주 좋은 시가 될 수 있다라는 것을 좀 보여주고 싶은 마음도 없지 않습니다.老母亲吻太俊，有的人半闭的眼角上、鼻翼上有沟壑漫涌上来。最初把我带到这个世界的他，山谷涌上嘴角的四方，缓慢地咀嚼着饭粒时，他嘴角的山谷很美。他吃尽了山谷里鸟的鸣叫、花和野菜、清澈的泉水和云的影子和山桑树和通草。在首尔的家常菜馆，和我面对面坐着吃饭的时候，他把整个山谷都带了过来，缓慢地咀嚼着饭粒，把很美的嘴角、山谷带给我看。 중국 작가들은 한국 작가들한테 이렇게 도시 사람의 내면 심리를 아주 세련하게 묘사했다. 또 기법이 좀 섬세하다. 이런 얘기도 많이 하고요. 또 전통적인 것이 동아시아의 전통적인 것이 겉으로는 안 보이지만은 잘 살아있다는 얘기도 들어봤고요. 최근에 들어와서는 한국 문학이 중국에서 굉장히 인기적입니다. 2005년도부터인가 굉장히 인기적입니다. 책도 많이 나오고요. 잘 팔리고 또 독자들의 반응도 아주 좋습니다. 그게 아마 김애란의 소설이 잘 팔릴 때부터 시작한 것 같아요. 그 다음에 한강, 그 다음에 조남조의 82년생은 김지영, 지금은 아몬드 뭐 이런 책들이 잘 팔립니다. 지금은 한국문학 코너가 따로 만들어 있어요. 서점에 가면 조금만 큰 서점에 가면 꼭 그거 있어요. 이게 참 좋은 것 같아요. 제 생각으로는 번역이라는 것이 최종적으로 추구하는 꿈이 아마 평화가 아닌가 싶습니다. 한국에도 중국에도 우리하고 비슷한 우리 옆에 있는 친구와 비슷한 그런 사람이 살아있구나라는 것을 깨닫게 하는 것, 그것이 우리 문학 번역가의 역할이고 책임이고 또 저의 꿈이라고 생각합니다.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, June 24th, here in South Korea. A few hours after Iran targeted a U.S. military base in Qatar in retaliation to the U.S. strike against Iran's nuclear sites this past weekend, Donald Trump on his social media platform claimed a ceasefire between Israel and Iran was in place to end their 12-day military conflict. And Mr. Trump's claim of a ceasefire between Israel and Iran fueled much optimism into the South Korean stock market, with the benchmark Kospi breaking past the 3,100 mark during trade on this Tuesday. Meanwhile, a confirmation hearing took place earlier today for Prime Minister nominee Kim Min-seok, and rival lawmakers clashed fiercely over his credentials. We start with a statement by U.S. President Donald Trump shared on his social media platform about a ceasefire between Israel and Iran to halt their military confrontation. Park Onu has the latest.
The ceasefire is now in effect. Please do not violate it. Donald Trump's remarks on Tuesday once again reiterating that a ceasefire between Israel and Iran has been made. That comes after his initial announcement on Monday, stating that the ceasefire would begin after Israel and Iran wind down their final missions, bringing an end to the war. Trump said both sides would remain peaceful and respectful throughout the process, and congratulated them for having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to bring the conflict to a close. He also expressed hope that the ceasefire will be a lasting one. On Tuesday, Israeli news outlets also reported that the ceasefire had begun. That's the same with Iranian state media reporting that the start of the ceasefire after Iran launched missiles on Israel that killed at least 4 people, even after 4 a.m. local time, the deadline it had set to stop attacks. While these developments point to progress, the situation continues to raise questions about whether the ceasefire will hold. One expert says that although Trump's announcement may appear one-sided, it likely came after prior coordination with both sides.
Trump may appear to have unilaterally declared a ceasefire, but he likely urged both Iran and Israel to end the war swiftly. So far, the ceasefire seems to be holding, but whether it lasts depends on how well both countries observe it.
The fate of the ceasefire in the conflict between Israel and Iran is now expected to depend on further official responses from the parties involved. Park Onu, Arirang News.
Now, just hours before Mr. Trump's touting of a truce being on track between Israel and Iran, the latter targeted an American military base in Qatar in retaliation for the U.S. strike against 3 Iranian nuclear sites this past weekend. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
In response to the United States' recent bombing of Iranian nuclear sites, Iran fired over a dozen missiles towards a U.S. base in Qatar on Monday. The missile attacks on the Al Udeid air base were intercepted by the U.S., leading to no casualties. According to U.S. President Donald Trump, the U.S. was warned in advance by Iran, adding the attacks were expected and were very effectively countered. He also said that 14 missiles were fired, with 13 being knocked down and 1 set free as it was headed in a non-threatening direction. Trump had summoned his top officials, including Defense Chief Pete Hegseth, Joint Chiefs Chair General Dan Kane, to the White House's Situation Room as the first reports of the Iranian strikes emerged. Taking to X on Monday, Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei said that Iran was not the aggressor and will not accept aggression from anyone under any circumstances. Calling it the logic of the Iranian nation, he said that his country will not submit to anyone's harassment. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi also said that Tehran's attack on the U.S. base in Qatar came in response to the U.S.'s aggression against Iran's territorial integrity and sovereignty. He warned Iran will be ready to respond again if the U.S. follows with further action. The Foreign Ministry also released a statement saying that Tehran only responded to the U.S. attacks and does not want to escalate tensions in the region. Meanwhile, the Arab Parliament on Monday strongly condemned Iran's attack on the U.S. base in Qatar, calling it a clear and unacceptable violation of Qatari sovereignty and international law. The parliament also called for a de-escalation of the conflict in the region. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Also, in related news, the local bourse responded favorably to Mr. Trump's claim of a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. In fact, the benchmark Kospi broke past the 3,100 mark today. Our correspondent Park Chun-han has more.
South Korea's stock market rallied with strong momentum on Tuesday, with potential reports indicating a temporary ceasefire between Israel and Iran. South Korea's benchmark Kospi for the first time in 3 years and 9 months surpassed 3,100 points and closed with over 3,103 points, up 2.96% from Monday's close. Also, South Korea's tech-heavy Kosdaq closed beyond 800 points for the first time in 11 months.
With oil prices falling and the U.S. dollar weakening again, foreign demand for South Korean stocks picked up, leading to strong buying. This helped the Kospi break through the 3,100 mark during intraday trading.
Among stocks that showed a strong increase on Tuesday were some of the country's tech giants, SK Hynix and Samsung Electronics. SK Hynix once again broke its all-time high, surpassing the 280,000 won mark, while Samsung Electronics rebounded to the 60,000 won level during the day. The won's exchange rate against the US dollar fell as tensions de-escalated. The rate opened at 1,369 won on the Seoul Foreign Exchange market, 15.31 lower than Monday's market close. Later in the day, the gap widened to end at around 1,361, down 24.11 from Monday's close at 3:30 p.m. Global oil prices sharply fell to pre-war levels following reports of a temporary ceasefire. Brent crude oil, which once traded above $81 on Monday, is trading below $70 as of Tuesday, which is an over 12% decrease in just a day. As South Korea is heavily dependent on oil imports, the changes in oil prices could affect the country's economy in various ways.
Korea imports almost 100% of its crude oil. When oil prices rise, it directly impacts the petrochemical industry, which uses oil as a raw material. But many other sectors are also tied to oil prices. Higher oil costs increase import prices and make exports more difficult.
South Korean officials on Monday held an interagency meeting to crack down on unfair oil price surges and monitor financial markets to swiftly address any difficulties that may arise. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea and the U.S. may hold a summit in a short time. This is according to Joseph Yun, the U.S. chargé d'affaires here in Seoul on this Tuesday, while addressing members of the local media. Yun claimed the American embassy is seeking to schedule a summit between the two presidents and that he had no doubt it would take place soon. He also spoke of tariff talks with the new South Korean administration being a priority for the Trump administration, which would also seek to address the bilateral alliance amid regional concerns, as well as defense cost sharing. On North Korea, Yoon added that prospects of direct engagement depend on North Korea. Meanwhile, the top office here is said to be seeking to set up a summit between the presidents Lee and Trump before August. A confirmation hearing took place earlier today for Prime Minister nominee Kim Min-seok, and as expected, rival lawmakers clashed fiercely over his credentials. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young covers the hearing and the conflict.
Democratic Party four-term lawmaker Kim Min-seok stood before the National Assembly on Tuesday, stating that if given the chance to serve as Prime Minister, he would do his best to fulfill his responsibilities by always listening and communicating.
I'll work to be a forward-looking and innovative Prime Minister, practical and unbound by protocol, hands-on rather than desk-bound, and communicative instead of giving one-sided directives.
Kim said that once in office, he would focus on quickly advancing policies over the next 100 days to address the previous government's shortcomings. He also vowed to make reviving the economy his top priority, starting with improving people's livelihoods affected by high prices. During the hearing, questions centered on Kim's previous conviction for illegal political funding, the sharp rise in his assets over the last 5 years, and concerns about his son's college admissions.
Apart from my official salary, my other income came from congratulatory and condolence money, 2 book launch events, and occasional help with living expenses from my wife's mother. These made up my total additional income.
Tuesday's confirmation hearing began with arguments and harsh remarks. The ruling Democratic Party and the main opposition People Power Party clashed from the start over the failure to select any witnesses and Kim's failure to submit key documents, mainly about his wealth and family. With no agreement on witnesses between the parties, the hearing proceeded without a first for a prime minister nominee.
For the first time, the confirmation hearing is being held without witnesses. It's a blind hearing due to the nominee's failure to submit requested data, having not given consent to share personal information.
There have been many unfair and unreasonable demands for documents. Is this really a proper confirmation hearing, or just an attempt to embarrass and criticize?
The Prime Minister is the only cabinet post needing parliamentary consent. Confirmation needs majority approval with a majority of lawmakers present. The two-day hearing continues through Wednesday. 신하영, Arirang News.
Also, at the Parliament, come Thursday this week, a plenary session will be held for a policy speech on the year's second supplementary budget. Democratic Party floor leader Kim Byung-gi and People Power Party floor leader Song On-seok met with National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik earlier on this Tuesday to address the plenary schedule and the redistribution of standing committee chairs. Now, this meeting also served as an introductory session between the newly appointed floor leaders and Speaker Woo, who urged both parties to submit their nominees for the Special Committee on Budget and Accounts also by Thursday to begin the budget review. Tomorrow, June 25th, we mark a solemn anniversary here. That is the start of the Korean War 75 years ago. Now, in light of this occasion, President Jae-myung called for better compensation for the country's war veterans at a cabinet meeting earlier today. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min covers these remarks and more.
우리가 보통 안보라고 하는 얘기를 할 때는 하도 너무 중요한 일이기도 하고 일상적인 것이어서 잘 느낌이 안 오죠. 그러나 우리 공동체 자체를 지키는 안보 문제는 아무리 강조해도 지나치지가 않습니다.
This was how President Lee Jae-myung began the cabinet meeting on Tuesday, a day before the nation remembers the 75th anniversary of the Korean War. Once again, noting the importance of peace without conflict, he called for efforts to better compensate those who made extraordinary sacrifices to defend the nation, adding that security is key to the economy. And the focus of the meeting was on the economy, trying to hammer out how to tamp down higher prices and help the lives of the people.
지금 대한민국을 포함해서 전 세계가 매우 상황이 어렵습니다. 취약계층들에 대해서 피해가 더 가중되지 않게 세심한 배려를.
Among over 24 items approved was a revision to a related law to extend fuel tax cuts, as well as individual consumption tax breaks following the crisis in the Middle East. He also reportedly instructed the Oceans and Fisheries Ministry to review whether it's possible to relocate to Busan by the end of this year. What was also notable was President Lee revisiting the importance of the responsibility of public servants, regardless of a political situation, saying how they handle their jobs makes a great difference.
권력이 그런 것 같습니다. 여러분들이 하시는 일, 작은 사인 하나, 또는 작은 관심 하나, 이게 여러분들한테는 아주 작은 한 순간, 또는 거의 의미 없는 어쩌면 그런 것들일지 모르지만 그게 세상에 미치는 영향은 그 작은 관심 또 어떤 판단에 의해서 누군가는 죽고 살고.
The president has emphasized the importance of public servant responsibility during nearly every meeting. This might be no coincidence, as the importance of details and competency has been often highlighted by the new government. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
5 years ago, the South Korean Army launched a project to restore and preserve tangible records of the Korean War. Well, in recent days, our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung went to see the progress the project has been making.
A Polonia oud box, known for its excellent preservation qualities, is taken out from a mobile rack. Inside is a heavily damaged operations log from RK Army headquarters, written in February 1952. This is just one of 81,000 military pieces from the Korean War that were designated as National Registered Cultural Heritage in 2020. Marking the very first modern war records to be designated as National Heritage, Army Archives Management Group has been restoring Korean War records, already having successfully restored about 40,000 pieces since 2020. I'm currently in the Military Policy Archives. This map records the changes in the location of the 6th Division's command post during the war. The green lines show advances, while the black lines indicate retreats. Aside from 1.6-meter-long map of the Korean 6th Division's CP location routes, are records showing details such as information on the enemy and operational plans from major battles of the Korean War. These important documents of the past, however, had to go through a long and painstaking restoration process.
After over 70 years, the records show severe discoloration, contamination, creases, damage, and acidification. We are working to eliminate such damage and repair the missing parts.
Restoring is one thing, preserving is another. To make sure the records are safely preserved, the digitized records are put on microfilm, known for its outstanding longevity and durability. It is indeed a demanding process requiring a great deal of patience, but junior soldiers say this allows them to feel the patriotic spirit of those whose steps they are following in.
As a person in charge of the Korean War Records Restoration Project and a junior soldier, I take great pride in honoring the sacrifices of senior comrades and continuing the legacy of the patriotic spirit.
Through the restoration and preservation process, the 75-year history of the Korean War gets passed down to future generations. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News, Keryong.
Meanwhile, on the entertainment front, K-pop boy band Stray Kids is bringing home the top honor, a favorite music group from this year's Kids' Choice Awards. The award ceremony took place this past Saturday in LA, and Stray Kids is now the second K-pop act to win this category, following BTS. Hosted by Nickelodeon, the award ceremony celebrates leading figures in music, television and film, with winners selected through fan votes. Back in March, Stray Kids also won Music Video of the Year and Best 3 Albums at Japan's 39th Gold Disc Awards. Seoul's campaign to transform its empty urban spaces into green venues for leisure continues. Our Cha Yun-kyung has a glimpse.
In Seodaemungu District, Seoul, lots of people came out to enjoy the warm sunshine in front of the Hongjaecheon riverbank, which is an artificial waterfall. A rose garden and a cafe have recently been built near the riverfront in Jungnam-gu District, Seoul, which is famous for rose festivals. A performing arts center will also be opened nearby. Around Saegokcheon Stream, in Gangnam-gu District, there is a riverside park for families. The Seoul Metropolitan Government is planning to complete building 27 more waterfront cultural spaces by next year.
People like to spend their spare time at riverside attractions. It will become more competitive among autonomous districts to build such places, so there are plans to make more.
Seoul Metropolitan Government is also restructuring plazas and empty lots as spaces for activities that blend nature, culture, and art. The government has planted some trees around Seoul Plaza and organized more cultural festivals, encouraging greater civic participation. More than 100 gardens have been built at Borame Park so far, which is about 400 square meters. As a Garden City Seoul project, which entered its third year in 2025, has produced things like the Seoul Sky Garden and the Outdoor Forest Museum in Namsan, the capital is transforming into a green city. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Canada and the European Union have signed a new security and defense pact amid growing geopolitical threats and regional instability. On Monday, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and European Council President Antonio Costa formalized the EU-Canada Security and Defence Partnership. The agreement, which is the first of its kind for the EU with a country from the Americas, aims to deepen collaboration in areas such as crisis management, cybersecurity, arms control, and support for Ukraine. A key component of the pact is Canada's potential participation in the EU's $172 billion joint procurement program, SAFE, facilitating joint defense acquisitions and industrial cooperation. The Canadian Prime Minister emphasized that the partnership would enable Canada to deliver on new capabilities more rapidly and more effectively. This reflects a strategic shift to diversify defense partnerships beyond traditional reliance on the United States. The summit also led to negotiations for a digital agreement to align standards on issues including consumer protection to make online platforms safer and more inclusive. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer have announced a new defense co-production agreement aimed at bolstering Ukraine's military capabilities amid ongoing Russian aggression. Zelensky met with Starmer in London on Monday after he visited King Charles III at Windsor Castle and unveiled a new industrial military co-production initiative aimed at enhancing Ukraine's defense infrastructure. The UK Prime Minister emphasized the significance of the collaboration, which he said builds on their 100-year partnership and represents a substantial advancement in the UK's support for Ukraine. Zelensky said it was a historic moment, highlighting that the partnership would strengthen both nations and express gratitude for the UK's continued assistance. The announcement follows a recent escalation in hostilities, with Russia launching a massive aerial attack on Kyiv involving drones and missiles, and comes a day before a NATO summit in The Hague. Ahead of Amazon tycoon Jeff Bezos' wedding festivities in Venice, activists are protesting to highlight concerns over over-tourism and wealth inequality. Activists from groups like No Space for Bezos and Greenpeace staged demonstrations across Venice on Monday, displaying banners with messages such as No Space for Bezos and if you can rent Venice for your wedding, you can pay more tax. Concerns have been raised about the strain on Venice's infrastructure, and activists argue that the lavish event exacerbates issues of over-tourism and neglects the needs of residents. Local civic groups have been staging protests against the wedding since last week. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory in Chile, the largest digital camera ever built, unveiled its first cosmic images on Monday. One of the images showcases detailed views of the Lagoon Nebulae, composed of gas and the stars within. In just over 10 hours, the observatory identified over 2,000 previously undiscovered asteroids, including 7 near-Earth objects. Equipped with a 3,200-megapixel camera, it's set to conduct the legacy survey of space and time, capturing a high-resolution time-lapse of the night sky every 3 nights for the next 10 years. The project aims to catalog approximately 20 billion galaxies, providing insights into mysteries of the cosmic world, such as dark matter. 최지희, Arirang News.
Clear skies are clouding over again as the entire country comes under the influence of monsoon rains, which will continue until tomorrow. About 20 to 70 millimeters of rain will fall in Gyeongsangnam-do Province, 20 to 60 millimeters in central regions and Gyeongsangbuk-do Province, and up to 40 millimeters in the Jeollado provinces. The rain will be accompanied by gusting winds with possible thunder and lightning, so please be careful. Most of the heat wave will have died down today, and the daytime temperature in Seoul tomorrow will be about 5 degrees lower than today at around 25 degrees. However, it will climb back up to nearly 29 degrees after the rain stops. Tomorrow morning will start warm at around 19 to 21 degrees with rain in most parts of the country. Daily highs will move up to 24 degrees in Daejeon and 26 degrees in Gwangju and Busan. More rain is forecast for central areas of the country this weekend. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Thank you for watching. Our panel session is coming up next.
Building a sustainable tomorrow. Connect, innovate, and prosper. Connecting goods to goods, region to region, people to people, generation to generation. Facilitating innovation for all, closing the digital divide. Building an inclusive technology ecosystem, promoting digital innovation by deepening dialogues on AI. Achieving shared prosperity, addressing global challenges. Energy transition, climate change, population decline, and pandemic responses. APEC-related events continuing in Seoul, the capital of the Republic of Korea, where diverse cultures blend. Jeju, the beautiful island, blessed with UNESCO Natural World Heritage Sites. Incheon, the vibrant international city, central hub connecting Asia-Pacific. Busan, the largest maritime city, centering around maritime trade and the logistics industry. And Gyeongju, the city hosting the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, where 2,000 years of profound history and modern, trendy, and youthful energy blend in a perfect balance. Here, a new chapter of economic exchanges will unfold for a better future.
걱정마저 혹시 네가 걱정하고 있을까 봐 두려움에 떨고 있어 애써 숨기려고 하고 싶진 않아 오늘도 이 밤을 넘기기를 런던은 지금쯤 뭘 하고 있니 바다 같은 나뭇잎은 춤추고 우린 그걸 따라 했어 그게 초록맘이었지 아무 말도 하지 않은 오늘 울음으로 맞췄어 했던 거야 너는 아직 과거에 있어 그게 무슨 소용이던가 하루 후에 가득 담아뒀던 사랑을 했어 너 그래 우리 모두 가요 I got the wizard Hey, you know what? We've got
Few hours after Iran targeted a U.S. military base in Qatar in retaliation to the U.S. strike against 3 Iranian nuclear sites this past weekend, Donald Trump on his social media platform claimed a ceasefire between Israel and Iran was in place to end their 12-day military conflict. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Tuesday, June 24th here in Seoul. I'm Min San-hee. So, are tensions in the Middle East over Iran's nuclear weapons ambitions simmering down? Well, to answer that question and more, I have Silio Ferretti with French daily Le Croix here in the studio. Silio, welcome back.
Glad to be here.
I also have Rui Valdez with Spanish news agency EFE Spain with us. Rui, it's been a while. Welcome back.
I'm glad to be here, Sonny.
Silio, let's take this in chronological order. First, could you walk us through the events that led to the Trump administration's attack against Iranian nuclear facilities this past weekend?
Sure. I think for that we need to even go back a bit in time. Back in 2018, during Trump's first mandate, President Trump pulled a nuclear deal between Iran and the US, and reimposed tough sanctions. Over the next year, there were also an oil tanker attack, drone shootdowns, and rising violence across the region. And things really boiled over in late 2019, when an American contractor was killed in Iraq, and the US blamed the militias, Iranian militias, that launched the attack. And days later, they killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. And at the time, we thought we were close to war with some missile launched by Iran. Yet this past weekend, President Trump made one of the most consequential military decisions of his presidency. In complete secrecy, he ordered Operation Midnight Hammer, a US strike targeting 3 key Iranian nuclear sites, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. What is remarkable in what unfolded this weekend is how secretive it was. On Friday evening, Trump appeared quite relaxed at his golf club in New Jersey, but behind the scenes, already B-2 stealth bombers were already taking off, loaded with 30,000-pound bunker busters bombs, and ready for an 18-hour flight across the world to reach Iran. This came after weeks of behind-the-scene planning. Trump publicly given Iran a 60-day deadline to come back to the negotiating table. Then he was saying he was not sure if he would intervene in the conflict between Israel and Iran. So he was kind of like putting a lot of fog around this decision that was apparently already made in his mind. The mission involved over 125 aircraft, bombers, fighters, refueling planes, and it was so secretive that even Democrats in Washington didn't know it was happening up until the very last minute. The Iranian government was only warned that the strikes would target some specific site, and it was not an all-out war. But still, after what happened, we're not sure in really what situation we are right now in the Middle East. Saturday night, Trump addressed the nation, calling the strike a spectacular success. And so far, after what happened this weekend, he announced a ceasefire. Apparently, it has been brokered already by Iranian military forces. So it's very unstable. I think the situation might evolve quickly in the days, hours to come.
Right. Actually, Silly, I was going to ask you that Mr. Trump addressed the public right off a couple of hours after the attack itself, and his message appeared to be relatively short.
Yes, President Trump addressed the nation late Saturday after ordering this massive airstrike. He called it a spectacular military success, saying the goal was to wipe out Iran nuclear's program, enrichment capacity especially, and stop the growing, what he called the growing nuclear threat from Iran. Trump claimed the site has been completely obliterated and warned Iran against any retaliation. He said there will be either peace or tragedy for Iran. He added that the US still has many targets he could strike in a matter of minutes. He didn't mention which one exactly. He described Iran as the bully of the Middle East and counted 40 years of hostile relationship between US and Iran since the revolution that happened in the 70s. He also thanked Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and praised the cooperation between US and Israel, calling a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. That's his word. Trump congratulated American service members also for executing their mission. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth insisted that the operation apparently avoided any civilian casualties. We have not seen any real clear countdown of casualties that happened, military or civilian. But Iran condemned this attack as a brutal aggression from the US and promised a response. They did bomb some bases in Qatar, but after this sort of ceasefire, we don't know exactly what will be the further response from Iran. We saw that maybe apparently they broke the ceasefire. We'll see how that could escalate. What is also interesting is that many people in the US were worried that it could escalate into a World War III. J.D. Vance took the microphone to sort of reassure American citizens, saying that it was, in any case, it would not be a prolonged war, whatever he means by that. But for the US, at least they want to make a sort of surgical strike, like really short, not get involved into too much war. That was a promise by Donald Trump to bring peace, at least for the US troops. We'll see if that will stand with the current situation.
Right then, Rory, as Celio mentioned, Iran condemned the attack. Could you walk us through Iran's response?
Yes, the immediate response of Iran, as Celio was saying, they fired 19 missiles to Al-Udeid air base of the US. But 13 of these missiles were intercepted, there was no casualties, and apparently Iran reported, made an early warning to the US so to reduce the damage. So basically it was more like a symbolic response. And quickly after, well, the situation developed into this ceasefire that we still don't know, we seem to be knowing right now as we're speaking that it has been very brief.
Right. Now, hours after Iran's attack against the military base in Qatar that you mentioned, US President Donald Trump took to his social media platform to claim that a ceasefire was on track between Israel and Iran. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, Trump was very proud of announcing this ceasefire of what he called a 12-day war. He said basically that both parts, Iran and Israel, came to him and he acted as the mediator and resolved this issue. Basically what he said, it was a complete and total ceasefire and called it the end of the war. On the other hand, as I tell you, around 10 minutes ago, the defense minister of Israel reported that they detected Iran missiles in direction towards their country. So this would mean that in around 4 hours or so, Iran has broke this ceasefire. The story gets interesting because after this Trump announcement that, of course, covered all media and everybody was paying a lot of attention, some pundits that usually are even against Trump were talking about how sophisticated was this operation and then the following negotiation. But if this ceasefire has been broken by Iran as we speak and there's going to still be conflict, this would put Trump in a very difficult situation because it will contradict all that he was saying just a few hours ago. Just to clarify also, the Israel defense minister said that they detected the Iran missiles and they will respond forcibly against it. So basically, this news still developing and still we need to wait quite a long time to really know how it's going to resolve.
Right, for sure. As you mentioned, Rui, it is an evolving situation right now in the Middle East as we speak. Celio, in the meantime, how has the international community, including South Korea, been responding to the events in the Middle East?
The international reaction to the US strike on Iran nuclear facilities has been quite mixed, ranging from alarm to cautious approval. Across the Middle East, many countries expressed deep concern. Saudi Arabia called for urgent diplomacy. Iraq, Qatar, Pakistan warned the strike could further destabilize an already unstable region. Iran's allies like Houthi in Yemen and Hamas strongly condemned the US attack, qualifying it a coward and a threat to global peace. In contrast, Israel celebrated the strikes. Prime Minister Netanyahu thanked President Trump and said the operation was carried out with a full coordination of Israel and a great success. In Europe, with US allies, the response was quite measured. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer supported efforts to stop Iran's nuclear ambition, but urged a return to diplomacy to avoid any escalation. Same goes with France and Germany, that expressed the same concern and called for returning back to diplomacy and de-escalation of the conflict. Same goes also with the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. He warned of the catastrophic consequences and condemned any escalation by the US. And in Asia, South Korea has called an emergency security meeting over the weekend and is currently monitoring the situation very closely, especially given its reliance on oil and energy imports from the region. Iran threatened to block the Hormuz Strait that would disrupt massively the old trade routes. So that's very important for a country like South Korea that benefit from this flow of commerce there. So far, the Korean government is monitoring the situation. Also, one thing to note is that 100 Korean citizens are living in Iran. Around half of them have moved to Turkmenistan up north to avoid any danger. Overall, the world is watching with quite unease the situation and worried that it could spiral into a broader conflict in the region.
Right. Hopefully not, though. Rui, prior to Mr. Trump's decision to strike 3 Iranian nuclear sites this past weekend, he spoke about giving the country, well, Iran that is, about 2 weeks before he makes his decision, a final decision. His decision, though, it came 2 days after his announcement that he would give a window of 2 weeks. What are pundits saying about the possible reasons behind this sudden strike by the US against Iran?
Yeah, well, very interestingly, the New York Times published a very detailed article of how Trump took that decision. And what they indicate is that he already gave a green light to the operation even before he announced this 2 weeks break to take the decision. This doesn't mean that he couldn't cancel at last minute the decision, but it seems that he was leaning more and more on the bombarding these nuclear facilities than to the truce. What are the reasons behind it, or the possible reasons? One could be that intelligence indicated an imminent threat, that Iran was actually building a nuclear weapon and was very close to achieve it. This theory is one of the less mentioned in general, because even US intelligence and international organizations have pointed out that there was no evidence that Iran was close to achieving this objective, this nuclear objective. They also call a diplomatic breakdown, that maybe when he announced that there was some kind of argument and they couldn't reach an agreement, and he just said, let's just bombard these facilities. One of the ones that it's being mentioned a lot is Israel pressure. Israel could have acted as a lobbyist to attract US and tell, look, right now we have Iran weakened at its most. Hezbollah and Hamas has been significantly or completely degraded. So this is the best moment to reduce all the nuclear capabilities of this threat, as they consider. So US and Trump could have measured risk and say, well, yeah, they actually have a point. This is the best moment to attack. And so they did, and they rushed into that decision. My take, or our take, it goes in that line, that Iran was clearly more weak than long time than before. And Israel and US saw this rare opportunity that they could attack hard. And I think the main point that's still of discussion right now is that if the claims of US that they do not want a regime change are actually gonna hold. Why? Because As we have seen, as we have been mentioning in this discussion, many of the things that Trump has been saying publicly don't necessarily coincide with the way he decides to go in the end. So, in principle, Israel and US are not seeking to change the regime in Iran, but still not clear what is their strategy for the day after. And this means that, okay, let's say they don't immediately seek for this regime change, but this Iran regime, theocratic regime, is going to be as weak, even more weak as before after the attack. So probably this will cause an internal conflict of people that are against the current powers. And this could complicate the situation because then you will have these countries, Israel and US, now trying to decide what to do if they created a crisis in Iran. Just to finalize, this problem, another problem has been mentioned in the part of Israel that Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, has been following kind of a policy of war to take a grip on power. Before he started the conflict, well, he didn't start it, but he reacted to the attacks that Hamas made in Israel. His popularity was very low. And after he starting attacking the Gaza Strip, his power started consolidating again. And it seems that this attack to Iran, in a way, is extending this trend that he has been having. So basically, the lack of a day-after policy has been seen already in Netanyahu in this other conflict, and now it seems that it could be also a problem from the U.S.
Right. Well, an end game to the situation in the Middle East appears quite vague as we speak. Celio, against this backdrop of tensions in the Middle East, this year's NATO summit is scheduled to start later today over in the Netherlands. Now, I suppose it's only logical to assume that the issues in the Middle East will dominate the discussions. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I think it will be on the table, and the question is whether the NATO allies will rally up behind the US. And I would say yes, but not without any complication and sort of compromise or conditions. NATO will likely show a broad rhetorical support for the US, especially in light of the escalating tension in the Middle East. However, behind the scene, things might not be so settled. President Trump arrived at the summit after just overseeing this massive strike in Iran. And also, it is combined with a demand to its allies in NATO to spend at least 5% of the GDP on defense, including Asian partners like Korea. And that's a lot of things to ask to allies to support a current military operation and to increase the budget on defense. Countries closest to Russia, for example, like Poland or the Baltic countries, have already agreed to Trump's increase on budget, but that's something they already were planning to do anyway because the tension in the region make them worry that Russia could attempt any sort of operation against them. Other countries that are more less concerned or maybe are struggling economically, like Spain, has already publicly rejected it. Prime Minister Sanchez of Spain said he will not abide by the 5%. They apparently managed to reach a compromise that is not settled down yet, but it would be 3.5% instead of the 5%. Other countries like France and Germany are okay with 5%, but I think there might be a sort of strategy behind saying like, okay for the 5%, but for France, for example, over the weekend, President Emmanuel Macron said maybe it would be beneficial to buy European products and not rely on US products. So it's a sort of compromise that will be surely talked during these 2 days of NATO summit. The deal is far from being signed. There will be a lot of discussion. Yes, NATO will appear to rally behind the US, but we'll have to see how it really concretizes in actions and what will be done in Europe. Maybe also we'll see from Asian partners. South Korean president will not be part of the NATO summit, but the security advisor will be. So maybe there will be some change also for South Korea that is really concerned with this 5%. It's a lot of money. There will be, if they accept, they will have to make cuts in other parts of Korean budget. Given the current economic situation of Korea, it might be difficult to enforce it. So I think whether it's from Europe or Korea, it will be interesting to see how far the loyalty to NATO and to the US will extend.
Right. Rui, as Celia just mentioned, President Lee Jae-myung is not attending this year's NATO summit in the Netherlands, but he is sending his top security advisor, Wee Sung-rak. What do you suppose are the broader implications of this particular decision?
Well, the presidential office has claimed domestic priorities, but I think Seoul may be dodging the U.S. military pressure. Why? As Celia was mentioning, South Korea was not the only country to cancel, or the leader to cancel their attendance to this NATO summit. Japan and Australia did the same, and many pundits think it's related to the fact that there will be this big announcement of the NATO members of increasing their contribution significantly to defense. And although Japan, Australia, and South Korea are not members of NATO, of course, the Pentagon has said recently that they are considering North Korea as part of the South Korea as part of the countries that they will have to increase their contribution to 5% of their GDP. Just to put it in context, right now South Korea contributes 2.32% of their GDP in national defense, so it's almost more than a double increase. To be fair with the presidential office, they also quoted the situation in the Middle East, and Celia was also mentioning how important or how damaging would be if Iran decides to close the Strait of Hormuz. South Korea right now, the imports oil, their national imports of oil are around 70% of their total. And 99% of these imports that come from the Middle East go through that Hormuz Strait. It doesn't mean that other countries in the region could find ways to export the oil through other paths, but still it's the most used path for South Korea. Korea, in fact, has a lot of military presence there to protect those assets, and it will create a major economic problem if it happens. Some hours ago, we would believe that this situation would come down. The stock market seemed to have been responding positively to the ceasefire, but with this news that Iran might have broken the ceasefire, this can all come down to the worst case scenario in terms of the increase of like a very significant increase on the prices of oil because of the closing of the Hormuz Strait. But yeah, this decision of not going to NATO, I think is a way of Seoul asserting their autonomy. They will send a representative, but not as high rank, of course, as the president. And just to say, we will still engage with you, but we are not at least convinced of this proposal of increasing to that extent.
Right, yeah, exactly. Ru, as you just mentioned, both South Korea, Japan and Australia, they're apparently downgrading their diplomatic presence at NATO this year. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this edition, but we will be speaking more about the situation in the Middle East on Thursday. For now, though, Ru, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
And Celia, thank you very much for your insights. Right, well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Press Perspective. We return same time tomorrow with another panel session, so do join us then.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서